Thank you so much for coming, and thank you to Casser and Peter for the invitation. It's wonderful to be here at the Computer History Museum. And last time I was here was 7 years ago. I was here with my daughter, first time she ever saw the Waymo, then the Google self-driving car Firefly, and she left inspired, and now she wants to make the world autonomous. And so these individuals on the stage here are building with AR, and they're inspiring. To kick things off, I'll ask each individual to kindly introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Parker, please.
Hey, everybody. I'm Parker Spielman. I'm from just down the street in Los Altos, California, but I currently live in Paris, France, and that's where I started Deja Blue Energy. We're a vertically integrated energy company focused around level 2 AC charging. For those less familiar, that's charging from about 3 to 22 kilowatts, generally in places where vehicles dwell a long period of time, including workplaces, apartment complexes, parking complexes, etc. We're a software company. We're about a year old, and there's a lot more to EV charging than just controlling the chargers. At the site level, we optimize with the inclusion of distributed energy resources like on-site solar and batteries, and then we pool all of these sites together to be able to become their energy retailer and optimize the energy that we provide across all these sites.
Ankur, please.
That's super cool. Hey everyone, I'm Ankur. I am from up in San Francisco, and I am the founder and CEO of a company called Braintrust. We're also a year old, although I think that's probably where the similarities end. We build software that helps companies build really, really good AI products. Our customers include companies like Notion, Airtable, Instacart, Zapier, Vercel, and many other companies that are building really, really great AI software products. And we help them do things like evals, observability, and prompt development.
Evan?
Hey, I'm Evan. Evan Conrad. I run the San Francisco Compute Company. I'm one of the co-founders. We help people train very large-scale models. So we run very large-scale GPU clusters, and we help people do it in the cheapest way possible. So we let people buy, say, a month on 2,000 H100s, and then optimize that spend so they get the most bang for their buck for the model that they're training.
Parker, we're going to start with you. You've spoken about a future where EVs aren't just eco-friendly. They're going to play an active role in energy management. What will that look like? How do we get there? And what role will AI play?
So one of the big changes that's happening is the electricity consumption is expected to 1.5 to 2x by 2050, more in developing nations. But the challenge in today's energy grid is that there isn't enough capacity to support that at peak demand. And if you think about the energy grid as a plumbing system for water, it's prohibitively expensive to overhaul the entire grid and make it big enough to support that capacity. And so what's changing is the energy system's becoming bidirectional. And instead of trying to serve that peak demand, more energy is being consumed during periods of low demand and off-peak, such as in California during the day when spot prices are 0 or sometimes negative, and it's being stored on the load side right where it's used. And what's happening with EV charging is there's this early pilot technology now for bidirectional charging that is estimated to soon, by 2030, be terawatts of storage capacity. And so electric vehicles are going to play a huge part in that, and AI is going to be what's optimizing how those vehicles participate in the energy markets.
The energy markets are getting interesting. Ankur, Braintrust just turned 1 a few weeks ago. Congratulations. Well done, sir. For automotive such as Deja Blue, providing EV solutions to professionals and building products around AI, where does your company fit into that? How do you help them scale?
Yeah, I think AI is really amazing because it allows us to do things that we could never do before with software. But one of the new challenges with AI is that it's non-deterministic, and so you might build a prototype, for example. Maybe something works in one city, or maybe it works on a few specific scenarios. And if you do that with traditional software, you can actually be pretty confident that it will work in all scenarios if it works in a few. But with AI, you have this kind of generality problem. So something that works maybe in a demo or a prototype doesn't necessarily work in all cases. And Braintrust basically gives software engineers the tools to actually understand that difference as they observe things that maybe behave differently. They can save them and then use them as test cases and run this process called evals, which is kind of like a software version of the scientific method that you run over and over and over again, and you get systematically better quality. Most of our customers, when we start working with them, their self-reported accuracy metrics are around 30 to 40%. And after just a few months of working with the software, they can get north of 80%, and then after several months, north of 95%. So that's how we can help.
Evan, the San Francisco Compute Company, you have a great backstory. Started with music. We can get into that later, but you let startups use huge amounts of compute for short periods of time. Why is that compelling for a company, especially in the automotive space?
Well, I don't think companies in the automotive space want to spend tens of millions more dollars than they have to. I like spending less money. Yeah, so we do the same thing that we do with sort of any genre of company. So in a startup's case, they might want to buy a large cluster that might cost them $1 million for a month or $10 million for a year. And most people like the $1 million versus the $10 million. And then at the larger scale, it's like instead of spending $100 million for a year, you might spend $10 million for a month. And it's pretty much the pitch.
What inspired you to build SF Compute?
We were the company that was trying to spend $1 million for a month, and nobody would do that, and we didn't have $10 million. And so basically what we did is we went out and we got a long contract and we started splitting it up for people, and that kind of led us down that path. Yeah, we're making an audio model.
So there's a lot of inspiration. Ankur, what was the inspiration behind Braintrust?
Yeah, actually not dissimilar from what Evan said. I used to run the AI team at a company called Figma, and before that, I started a company that Figma acquired. And at both companies, it was just super hard for us to release new versions of our AI products. My brother actually works at Braintrust too, and he worked in the AV industry at Neuro, as did a number of our early employees, and they had exactly the same problem. I think in AV, it's maybe more so in any industry, critically important that you optimize for quality and understand, assess, and remove failure cases. And so, just having built these types of products over and over again, we ended up building like the same internal tooling to solve the problem multiple times. And last summer, actually realized that now that other companies are really starting to invest in AI, this was becoming a market problem, and that's how Braintrust got started.
So you just saw an opportunity in the market and decided to build.
Yeah, it was interesting. We actually talked to a number of companies, actually including Applied, because ours is an investor in Braintrust, and sort of asked them a bunch of questions about the space. And a few companies actually emailed us like a couple days later and said, "Hey, I'm going to create a Slack channel and just tell you guys what to build because we need this so badly that we're very desperate." And having been around startups for longer than I'm willing to admit now, that doesn't happen every day, and so that was a pretty exciting signal.
Parker, you're from Los Altos, but you're building your startup in France. Why?
The food.
Don't sugarcoat the answer.
During the pandemic, that was the first time in my lifetime I'd seen the world work in parallel toward a goal, albeit independently in parallel, to develop the COVID vaccine. And I think electrification is a really interesting example where it's also true. And if you look at megawatt charging with liquid cooling being developed in China, you look in the Netherlands where you have, I think, the largest pilot for a bidirectional city in Utrecht, where public policy aligned with technology to bring this into a single city. And I think this problem is much bigger than Silicon Valley. It's much bigger than any single place. And so we're trying to take a global perspective and participate to this problem in the bigger context.
How would you compare and contrast startup culture in France versus the United States?
There's the cultural nuances. Like you cannot eat work lunch at your desk. It is a total faux pas. And August it's really true. The entire country shuts down, and you cannot do business during August. So I think there's some nuance around those things. But the French school system, the Grand Écoles, are producing amazing talent, and we've been able to hire well. Although the hiring process also takes longer with Préavis, it takes about 4 months from sign until people join. So there's a lot of nuances and differences, but there's a lot of talent out there. And again, we're competing in a global context where we have great cost advantages in that system.
Evan, you're a co-founder. How did you choose your co-founder?
He was my neighbor. I kind of liked him. Every day I would go upstairs. He lived in the apartment above us, and he would have like a giant slab of meat that he was cooking, and occasionally he offered it to me. And if you want to win a co-founder, I think that's how you do it.
So you just have to have a yummy tummy and then you're good?
Yeah, we also ran this thing called AI Grant together. We ran the first batch of AI Grant, and then we sort of went off to start a company of ourselves. So maybe that's like a more real answer. But the actual real answer is I did meet him as a neighbor, in which I was living in a house full of startup people, and he had looked through the window and he saw that there was a whiteboard, and on that whiteboard there was KPIs written on it, and then there was something that said just like, "We are going to win." We didn't, not with that startup. But he looked through the window and said, because he was apartment searching, and apparently there was an apartment above us that was for rent. He was like, "This is the place." So he knocked on the door, and then he met all of us. And then later, like 2 years later, I started a company with him. It's going pretty well.
Okay. You meet your neighbor and eat good food, and then you could build a startup together.
Got to meet your neighbors.
You'd say, "Hi, Mr. Rogers knows how to do that." Ankur, this is your second startup. What did you do differently this time? Or what do you want to do differently?
Yeah, I think times have changed. Like the previous time I started a company as a CEO, I spent very comparatively less time working hands-on on the product. I know Evan pretty well. He's like very, very hands-on, and I think that reflects kind of a change in times. Like it's not as useful now as a founder to spend so much time like talking to people. People really require, and the expectations around product quality have become astronomically high. And so I think the biggest change is just how much of our time we spend working on the core product and service, and trying to make that exceptional quality over time spent chatting with people.
What time did you spend initially developing the business model?
1 day. That's it? Yeah.
How?
There's this very smart person who's also an investor in Applied named Elad. And he is probably one of the best investors in the Valley, someone I've known for a very, very long time. And we were kind of, frequently chatting about various things. And when we started talking about this idea, I think at least the business plan part of it is really straightforward. There's a number of companies that have helped many, many enterprises around the world become good at doing machine learning. And we sort of saw that same opportunity happening with modern AI that's powered by large language models, which are much, much, much easier for people to use. And so the math is pretty simple. I mean, if you compare the number of software engineers who are all potential users of our product to the number of data scientists or machine learning engineers, the number is significantly higher. And so the market opportunity is very clear.
Parker, how did you develop your business model?
So it's a combination of trying to look at where's the technology heading and how do we build for that, as well as what are the current problems that exist today. And one of those big challenges is reliability. And it's a hard problem because so many different things can go wrong, from the charger, the charging cable, the car, the app, power on site, connectivity. And it's an industry that's historically been driven by a lot of construction players who are value add resellers, pooling third-party hardware and software. But that means when things break, it's very hard for them to fix it. And often you have these install and forget scenarios. And so we saw this future potential with bidirectional charging and aggregating these sites together. And we went to market trying to solve the immediate problems that exist.
How are you building for reliability? Because in America, the EV chargers, they stink. They're horrible. They're broken most of the time. How are you building for reliability?
My previous experience was in ride sharing. And reliability was a really challenging issue in that domain as well, because you have independent actors doing whatever they want, and you're trying to understand, are they going to show up, and are they going to show up where you need them? And so we spent a lot of time building the tooling to understand, to empower operators, right? In our current world, that's your electrician who might go on site to do it, but as well as a lot of automation around detecting and resolving those issues with software. And so we integrate with many of the leading charger manufacturers, manage connectivity, network switches, all these things together, and are putting that together so that you can solve this problem holistically.
Because if you can solve the reliability, then you can drive consumer adoption. Evan, you're doing something really interesting at San Francisco Compute, soon to be FSC, as we talked about backstage. You're selling affordable pre-training clusters to customers, big and small, including research labs, startups, and grad students. However, some of these companies, they don't have the bucks, or if you want to use the anti-term, daddy war bucks, to pay for it. How do you balance setting accessible pricing for excessive compute? Will you also have profitability because you recently raised $25 million, so you have shareholders?
So we sell less smaller blocks of time, but the actual per hour cost is higher. So typically somebody can pay, is willing to pay more for a week or a month on a very large cluster than they are willing to pay as a volume discount. But the problem is that you cannot get a volume discount if you are, the total amount of money you would need to buy for a year to 2 years is more than most startups can realistically afford. And so the way that they successfully do this is they go out to the VCs of the world and they say, hi, can I have a $50 million pre-seed? And some of them succeed. And then those are the ones that are able to train large scale models. And everybody else sort of isn't able to and doesn't succeed. And then they come to us. And then we say, yes, you also can train a large model if you want, because we don't force you to buy for a year or 2 years. You can just start with what you have, and we'll help you scale along the way.
But how do you balance the need for profitability when you're doing good and helping?
We make money.
You have to make money, or
no. I mean, we make money. So the amount of money that you charge on a per hour basis is higher than other folks because we're charging smaller units of time. It's kind of like if you maybe rented out this place, you might pay more for just a day worth of this place. Whereas if you were going to buy the entire building, your per day price might actually be lower. But then you have to buy the whole building for a long time.
Okay. Ankur, you made Braintrust a platform free to academic and non-commercial open source projects while enterprises pay. Why?
Well, I think first of all, the problem that we're solving, it doesn't have the same underlying hardware dynamics as I think maybe what either of you are working on. So the cost to us to provide the service for free for academics and hobbyists and stuff, it's actually very, very low. And so part of it is that it's not a huge investment on our end. And then the other part is I think it's just very, very important for research in particular to have very rigorous evaluation. And evaluation can be so difficult to do just from a software manual labor perspective that a lot of people don't do it very well. And so we're very motivated by trying to make the overall quality of the AI ecosystem and the models that you all use better. And if we can contribute to that by giving free access to folks, we absolutely want to do it.
How do you cater to the different customers in different sizes and a variety of different industries, backgrounds, and needs?
Well, I think one of the things we benefit from with the current AI wave is that large language models are now accessible to just about anyone who participates in the kind of standard software engineering product development workflow. And that's become very standardized over the past several years. So folks that understand how to write, TypeScript, Python, Java, this is sort of the standard programming languages, product managers, designers who use tools like Figma, people who use project management tools like Jira and Linear and so on. They're all sort of familiar with the basic workflow around software development, and Braintrust fits very naturally into that workflow. So that's made kind of the cost or challenge for folks from a variety of different industries, quite low.
If you look at your business and staying on the AI theme, investors are making huge bets on AI. How are you staying ahead of these emerging trends?
I think that's probably one of the most important things that we structurally do as a company, which is we're very close with the large labs, and we prioritize working with customers who are at the very, very forefront of developing with AI. And so our information flow about what's coming and the challenges people are running into at very large scale it's actually very good. And I think if we didn't have that, then we wouldn't be able to service kind of the broader market as effectively as we can.
Evan, how is SF Compute staying ahead as the investors continue to pour money into AI?
So the way it works is VCs put money into startups, and then we work with the people they didn't put money into. Because those people aren't flush with cash, and therefore they actually have to like optimize their capex and take the little money that they did get, and train a model that produces a product that makes profit. And so that's the case for startups. It's also the case for like large companies as well, who have real businesses that can't just live on VC money all forever, and therefore have to like actually, money in to money out. So,
how big of a company do you think SF Compute could become?
how big of what?
How big of a company can SF Compute become?
A Fortune 500. Compute market's projected to be about like $2 trillion. I mean, we're selling supercomputers, so big.
Big's great, Parker. If you look at the EV industry, especially for charging, it's dominated by large corporations, the Siemens, the Hitachis, the ABBs. How are you breaking into an ecosystem when they're dealing with the competitors with such deep pockets of industrial knowledge?
The analogy I like to use is what happened in oil and gas. And you started with Standard Oil, right? The great early example in the energy markets of a vertically integrated company that drove most of its competitors out of business. And today we have Exxon, we have Shell. And what's happening with EV charging is we're taking that gas station and we're cutting it into 10, 100,000 pieces and saying to every business owner, every parking garage, you need to have this little piece of it, right? And so that's totally changing how that industry works, and it's losing all of the vertical aggregation. And so what we're trying to do is build the tooling and bring down the cost by providing back some of those opportunities for these independent pieces.
How do you see your market changing over time?
I think there are many ways to answer that from a hardware and technology perspective, right? Bidirectional charging is one of these forefront technologies that we expect to be in early mass market in the next 5 years. And then after that, like we're here talking about autonomous vehicles and AI, and I think they all really come together when you think about wireless charging, autonomous vehicle hubs, and managing the energy to charge all those things with no humans involved.
The AVs they're scaling. We're seeing it with Waymo and Cruise next year. We'll see them begin to scale once again. How far out are you planning for this?
You got to do two things, right? You got to build a customer base and a business now, and as Wayne Gretzky said, skate where the puck is heading.
You have to. Ankur, how far out do you plan for where your company's going? Are you planning 5 years in the future, 10 years in the future? How far are you planning?
Yeah, I mean, I think realistically, as a tiny startup, we plan, the current day, the next few months, and the next, year or two. So it's quite challenging, especially given how quickly AI is moving to make realistic plans for the next several years. However, I think one of the things that we do, and I've seen some of our smartest customers do, is actually create multiple product roadmaps that make different bets about how the frontier AI models might evolve. So some of our customers have kind of like an AGI roadmap and a non-AGI roadmap for AI. I've seen this be a really effective exercise. I would encourage folks to try it out if you haven't already, because it just lets you sort of, sometimes there's analysis paralysis with some of these big open questions around AI, and it kind of lets you embrace, different realities and play them out and see how they affect your business.
How do you see the AI market evolving? Any big changes that you see potentially occurring?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people have talked about how we tend to overestimate what you can do in a year and underestimate what you can do in 10 years. I think AI is just a fantastic example of that. Those of us who live in, the Silicon Valley bubble, or maybe, the tech bubble within a larger company, We tend now, especially if you spend a lot of time using models, to just observe everyday problems around us and think, wow, why am I not doing this with the help of a large language model? But if you think about it, it's going to take 10 years for companies and consumers and all the infrastructure that these two are working on to sort of propagate to the point where large language models can be that ubiquitous. Again, I've been doing this for a while now, so I got to see the entire thing play out with cloud, and I think it's a great analogy for what can happen with AI. I think it's going to take some time.
From the time, and then when does the consumer really latch on and it becomes part of their daily lives outside of putting random queries into ChatGPT? When does it become an actual meaningful part of their life?
I would argue personally, and also based on what I've seen with my family, that typing random stuff into ChatGPT is actually a very meaningful part of a lot of people's lives now. I think there's different flavors of this. For programmers like myself, it's very difficult now to use software that doesn't have autocomplete built into it because GitHub and now others like Cursor have really made that a ubiquitous experience. I think ChatGPT and sort of that level of quality around chatbots is starting to become a ubiquitous expectation for consumers. And I think there's some really exciting yet to be invented or released AI consumer experiences that will dramatically change what we expect. A great analogy of this is Uber. Yeah, both of you guys have been talking about how everything should be on demand, but prior to Uber and Lyft, the expectation around on-demand services was just not there, and I think we have at least one of those to come with AI in the future.
That's a great analogy because Uber's a verb and you're used to it, and habits are changed. Our habits are changed. I Ubered all over the past 48 hours. Yeah. It's completely changed, and you're right about the AS becoming part of your workflow. Evan, how do you see the AI market evolving? Any major breakthroughs that you're seeing from your side?
I think there's going to be lots of little modalities that aren't language models that are kind of important, or language models mixed with other modalities. So to answer your question from before, I don't think consumers will care unless they are driven somewhere by an autonomous vehicle. Chatbots are cool and all that, but man, is it really cool if you were driven somewhere by a car that drove itself? Man, is it really cool if you didn't get cancer because of drug that was some Arc Institute project or whatnot? Or it's generally very cool to have a robot that's actually walking around in the real world. AI is the future. Let's actually build the future. We should actually do it, not just sort of pretend as if we are. But that's, I think, what the plan is.
Yeah, well, it's cool. There's a thing called regulation in government, and they don't let cool things work all the time. So
Yeah.
What risk does that pose?
On the AV side, y'all tell me. I'm over here with the GPU clusters. In our case, the regulation we'd like to see changed is permitting reform, make sure that we can actually get power to the data centers, get hookups to the grid, and so on. But I think there's probably a lot of this stuff actually has to be real physical things, and so we should make that occur.
Parker, are there any regulatory challenges that you're facing? Obviously, the EU has more regulatory. We saw what they did to Apple today and Alphabet today. Not very nice. $17 billion worth.
So one of the cool things about France, which was our launch market, is there are a lot of regulations, but they're actually very much supporting electrification, and they're very much supporting electrification for large groups of co-located vehicles. There's the law, LOM, and there's a couple really profound things that law does. It requires parking lots above a certain size to put in a double-digit percentage of EV chargers in those parking lots. And it also requires fleets to electrify by 2030 in 3 increments, getting to 100% then. And in France, 70-80% of vehicles are coming through the employment group for any mid and upper level employee. And so that's causing these fleets to turn over way faster than if it was private car ownership, because they're renewing the fleets every 6 months. So yeah, we're very affected by regulation, but in this case, it's positive.
Are you concerned if you expand into Scandinavia, the different regulatory environments, or will you stay in the EU from a regulatory standpoint?
I think we're actively looking at that from a number of different perspectives, right? When we look at bidirectional charging, there's a whole ecosystem around that. are you double taxed if you take energy off the grid and then put it back on the grid for using that infrastructure? What is the amount of solar available during the day? What is the variance between spot prices? What are the site owner electricity contracts, and how much does that vary from the spot price? So there's a lot going on, and it's a quickly evolving market as well. And those are some of the things that we're looking at.
Ankur, are there any concerns from a regulatory standpoint in your market as you grow your business and you scale your business that you're concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, California just passed some regulation that I think I'm sure Evan has thought quite a bit about. Certainly, probably more than I have. That I don't want to get too opinionated on the stage, but probably hampers California companies' ability to innovate in AI. And I think we're downstream from a lot of the very frontier, model training stuff, and so it doesn't affect us directly quite as much. But I think we're generally keeping an eye out on things, and I would say in AI especially, we don't know that much about the trajectory of AI. Honestly, I wish the government ran the 2 roadmap exercise as well and sort of thought about both scenarios quite deeply, because I think in the somewhat likely probability that we're not headed towards AGI over the next small handful of years, there's a lot of regulation that would hamper our ability to do, I think, really basic and valuable innovation like what Evan was just talking about. And so that's kind of how we think about it.
It's clearly a risk, but how do you avoid that risk? Is it education? Is it sitting down and have a conversation? I mean, how do you pivot and prepare for that potential risk?
Well, I think somewhat conveniently it happens at the state level rather than the federal level, at least in the U.S. right now. And so hopefully there's some competition among states, and things play out that way. But within the U.S. there's still some opportunity to try different things out. I'm maybe skeptical that more education will make a meaningful difference given various people's agendas, but maybe I'll leave it at that.
All right, I have to ask you the follow-up. Is there a need for a national AI bill then?
Honestly, I wouldn't try to suggest that I'm qualified to give a great answer to that question. Personal opinion is that I think it's probably better, given that we have state level governments, to try and hash the stuff out with multiple concurrent experiments. And if something seems to work really well, or we learn more about the impact or danger of AI, then we can accelerate doing something at a bigger scale.
We learned in autonomous vehicles there's a patchwork now, and so we're seeing that very clearly here. Parker, as we look to wrap up, and I'm going to go down the line on this, to a member of the audience who's interested in building the future, but they haven't found that moment of inspiration yet, what would you say to them?
I think it takes both patience and time, and that's because if you decided you could go after any problem, that's really overwhelming. And so, I think it took us 6 to 9 months just to figure out what space we wanted to go in and how to approach that space, and learn everything about electrification with the help of ChatGPT and a lot of other resources. And so, I think you got to believe that you can do it, and be patient and enjoy the process.
Ankur, what would you say where they can find that inspiration to build?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. Maybe I'll give a slightly different perspective on this in the context of AI specifically. I would highly recommend doing really simple, basic things, and just trying to play with modern AI and see what you can build. Actually, I've seen a number of enterprise customers that we work with build very, very basic internal software products, like question answering bots on top of their corporate wiki. Yes, there are plenty of software products you can procure that do that for you, but actually just the exercise of building those things, which are very simple and low, not very ambiguous internally, it kind of trains the internal team on how this stuff works, what some of the security and performance cost considerations are, and the teams that do that then become very well equipped to imagine the other maybe external facing use cases that could be really valuable at a company. So I would just start.
Evan?
Well, I'm kind of dumb. And so I like not picking things that are like super innovative or crazy. I like just like, what if that was cheaper sort of ideas, or like what if that was more reliable? And so I would pick a thing that's like a number and then make that number go in a particular direction, because it's really great when numbers go in particular directions. You get to watch them move, they dance, there's a whole fun about that. But yeah, pick things that are simple, and then simple but like impactful if you actually can move them.
Okay, I'll keep it simple. Find your inspiration, go build something, make sure it's profitable. To our panelists, thank you so much.